And the reason I invited you today was you wrote me on LinkedIn, and you were sharing your point of view on the open source project that many people are working on to get ventilators made quickly, efficiently to market where they are desperately needed. And at the time you first reached me, you weren't happy with the way things were going. So maybe set the stage of what you saw and what you subsequently learned. Importantly, what the folks on the phone can do now to help mitigate the pandemic.
Absolutely. So when I saw that Medtronic, and I'm gonna pick on Medtronic for a moment here, just because they're a very large company. So actually, prior to Medtronic, I did research on all the collaborations with basically 3 companies: Ventec, G, and Medtronic, and so forth. So you see a lot of this stuff on the news, but I started reading articles and all this stuff. And what I did was I started reaching out to folks in these companies, and I worked my way up to the top. Communicated with a lot of these folks, and then all of a sudden I noticed that Medtronic decided they were going to port the PB560 out as an open source, which initially I got really excited about because I didn't know too much about the 560. And they released their first set of files, and immediately when I looked at the first set of files, as a manufacturing and electronics engineer, I said to myself, you can't build from these files. And it wasn't clear to me in the beginning that they were going to give more files out to the community. But they have since downloaded, they dropped down 2 more packages, actually 3 more packages. There's 4 packets in total, and they have given a lot more detail. The problem is when I started to get the bills of materials together, because I'm focusing in here on the electronics, I noticed that there was a lot of obsolescence, obsolete parts, parts availability, and so forth. And, it was concerning to me. So the PB560 is an older product and hence has its challenges to be able to manufacture. What I also saw out there was that everybody was grabbing these files and trying to do something with them without any collaboration. And, that's my biggest concern right now is that, everybody's on their own road and we're not collaborating. And how do we collaborate to actually make something happen? Because, I'm very concerned that, there's some people out there that are doing things who are not qualified to be doing things. God only knows what products are going to be put into the market. People are desperate. They're going to use them. And to me, it's a little scary about what could happen out there. So I continued to reach out to folks. I reached out to the top of the chain at Medtronic. So I reached out to Jeff, Martha, and Omar, who are the leaders of that organization. And I was able to get a response. Omar sent me to Rob, their VP of R&D. I had a conversation with Rob on Saturday. He gave me a lot of information about what they're doing that's probably not published in the news, which gave me a better sense of what was going on. And Jeff sent me an email with a very similar message. So what's going on? Initially I was pretty upset about it. I felt like it might have been a publicity stunt, and they were just throwing files out there, and and all this type of stuff. What the plan is and what they've proposed is they're actually, and I believe it's happening in Ireland. They have a factory in Ireland. They are going to make the PB560 themselves, as well as putting the open source out there to see if other people can make it. Now, after they put the open source out there, obviously everybody in the world tried to contact Medtronic and wanted to be a partner, which I assumed would be the case. So I'm pretty persistent in the things that I do. So I literally kept pestering these folks until they responded to me, and they did, which was great. So what they've done is they've partnered up with 3 other outside resources, large resources. One I know is Foxconn in Wisconsin, and they agreed to supply technical support to these 3 large folks to help them bring up and hopefully make more of the PB560. So that's good. You have to imagine that, with the amount of people that have been reaching out to Medtronic, that they can't service everybody in that
Sure.
fashion. Because
Let me ask you, Tom, just a few questions. You know that I'm not an engineer, and I'm more of a cruise director showing people where to find one another in the Lido deck. You're talking about the 560. Is that the only model that we're talking about for Medtronic? I don't know if there are lots of models that they make and that's the easiest one or the quickest to make, or.
Well, as you could imagine, they're a large business and they have intellectual property. So, I don't see them dropping
all of the files. They're
their
just
latest, their latest and greatest product. So the PB560 is an older product. So that's what they've decided to release out there. There are other people releasing other open source projects and so forth, but I'm an engineer, and I'll be honest with you, I keep looking out there and so forth. I'm overwhelmed by what's going on, and what I'm trying to figure out, and I don't have the answer, and that's why I'm here speaking with you today to see if other folks have thoughts on this matter, is how do we pull together and unify the efforts of really smart people here and do something that could make a difference.
Let me stop you there for a moment, and thank you for setting it up that way. The reason for these calls is not, hey, everybody, here's my smart friend Tom, and let him talk at you for a half hour. This is a conversation. I, of course, can't let 100 people speak at once, so please use the chat and write me, and I will faithfully relay your comments and questions. In some cases, perhaps even open the phone so that you can speak as well. I do have something here from William. Let me throw this in here, unless you have more that you want to kind of get out first before we start.
No, that's the premise of what's going. That's the premise of what's going on. I mean, I'm co-chair of a local manufacturing alliance, and before the pandemic and all this type of stuff, it's been hard to get manufacturers to align with each other without a crisis situation. So go ahead, Joe, take it from there.
Are you finding that it's easier now because there's a crisis and all of our, our walls are down and let's do the common good, and so it's easier?
I believe so. I believe also the problem is that there's, everybody's wanting to do something, and there needs to be a conductor to the orchestra. Right. That's exactly how I presented it to Medtronic. And
don't think my friend Pierre's on right now. I'm going to share in the chat box. There is a, so as I'm going to share 2 things. First is I created a group called the Medical Devices Group COVID-19 Response Team. And this is a phone call for them. And then I also created a chat room, which I've just given you the link to, which now has 100 and some odd people. A lot of people joined last night. And Tom is in there, and a lot of people are having conversations about PPE and ventilation. It's free, and it is the easiest way I know to get people talking faster. So I invite you all. Pierre is part of a group called Helpful Engineering. They've already gotten coverage in the New York Times by producing some face shields and basically open sourcing what they've come up with to anyone who will manufacture them, which I think is great. I'm going to give you the URL for them as well. When I checked yesterday, they had more than 16,000 people registered in that chat room. So I'm promoting it because it's 160 times bigger than mine, and the chances of you finding exactly the person that you need is better, but it's very big, and I haven't figured out how to navigate the waters and see what channels and what people, but I wanted to make everyone aware of it. Lee asked, I'm going to get to William's question, but Lee asked, have you looked to redesign the PB560?
So I looked at the files, and my opinion is that the time that it will take to redesign a system like that is not going to be fruitful for our current needs. I stand by, my thoughts that everything that's going on right now is going to spur innovation, but to be able to help with the current pandemic, I feel like we need manufacturing files and proven products that are ready to be made now for it to be effective.
I personally agree with you. In fact, Khalid just wrote in and said, I have to assume we're past the point where we can do anything that affects this challenge. We're about a week or 10 days to the peak. I think the real question is, how do we get capacity for surge manufacturing in this country before the next challenge? Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's good. I mean, so there's, it's a parallel approach, right? We definitely need to align ourselves to make sure that when we have another crisis like this, which, you don't know what the next crisis is that we're going to have. Nobody ever could have guessed that this would have occurred. I think it has to do with starting local, and we've done that in the Philadelphia area, in Bucks and Montgomery County. Trying to create a manufacturing alliance to bring people together, and we have connections with the state of Pennsylvania. In fact, there's some people on the call here that I see names that I'm familiar with, and Pennsylvania obviously has coordination with the rest of the country. So I'm speaking on behalf of the United States right now, but we have to start somewhere. So it's somehow getting aligned and on the same page. I don't have the answer. I'm writing and communicating and talking and touching as many people as I can to try to figure out what that answer is, but I don't have it.
I'm going to, I don't typically do this, but because this conversation is so not just Tom, but everybody, if when you're leaving a comment, you quote unquote really want the mic, I'll open your phone line so that you can speak directly. So I'll do that on a as needed basis. Where I am right now is, I understand it to be that anyone who's thinking about starting from scratch on a ventilator design is too late. That it's just not practical, that you're going to conceive something, build something, and I know Michelle's on the line, and she's got a question here for you. In fact, Michelle, I'm going to put you on, but I'm thinking that even though the EUA relaxes, you should be able to talk, Michelle. Even though the EUA relaxes regulatory requirements before you release a product dramatically, it's still going to take long enough that the surge will have long since passed. That's what I think. Michelle, would you agree with that?
I do. The guidance document for ventilators is a little bit different than the ones for the PPE, where the PPE, they really relaxed a lot of requirements for what those products had to go through in terms of quality management system and design history, that sort of thing. But for the ventilator one, they're primarily focused on people who already have legally marketed ventilators.
Okay, maybe that was a mistake. While she was talking, I made her a presenter and I might have messed up everything. Michelle, can you?
Can I?
Yeah, you can talk still, and you can put on your camera if you like.
Okay.
Thanks.
So anyhow, the guidance document really opened up design changes for existing manufacturers of ventilators to make the ventilators for different intended uses, to be able to be reused with more than one patient easier, and all of those types of things without having to go through the new 510K process. But for people who were not yet manufacturers, they still have to communicate with the FDA and tell them what their product and their plan and their approach is, and start a dialogue with FDA underneath this guidance document. So it's not just bring any and all ventilators to market as fast as possible.
Right, I agree with you 100%. And what I've been trying to push is that, I know that our company, as well as many other companies who are owned by my peers, can put aside certain projects right now and make components. And that's what I've been trying to push, because, we're all qualified to be able to do that. There just needs to be an opportunity and somebody to lead the way. I haven't been successful yet at figuring that out.
That's exactly right, because if we don't have enough component supply, everybody and their mom starting to make a respirator that's only gonna exacerbate the supply chain problem with the components.
Exactly. And it's scary, because if everybody's trying to make it, this is not, there's a difference between a plastic shield and a device that's controlled by electronics.
Yes. And I'm concerned because a lot of these big companies have got recalls out the yin yang and have ended up with warning letters and consent decrees in their regulatory history for some of the products we're talking about. So it's like, okay, we're going to take some of the largest manufacturers of ventilators that don't have a stellar regulatory history, and then put all this pressure to scale up and open source their designs that we don't know how robust those designs really were to start with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I'm going to read, because the comments are coming in fast and furious now. I'm just, a number of them are just comments, so let me throw that out there. Andre agrees with Michelle. A lot of companies are spinning their wheels thinking they can get a ventilator design onto the market without regulatory control. No need to comment. Let me read the next thing. Larry says, in the RA/QA world for ventilators, RA pales in consideration of the quality challenge. So he's saying that RA is, as I understand it, far behind quality. Jim is saying collaboration should happen, as Tom suggests, with all companies making different parts. Let me stop on that one, because that sounds perfectly logical. It sounds like Henry Ford and you do this and you do that, but that requires some great project leader in the sky saying this is how it's going to work. And I don't know how that comes about. I'm sure that there are many on the phone who would say, I'll do it. I mean, even I, who am not by design a project manager, would take the role of, hey, I'm trying to be a liaison for everybody. Everybody let me or somebody or some group know, and but I'm looking, at Helpful Engineering. I put the correct link out there now. With 16,000 people there, I don't know how they are. So I'm blathering, but I'm eager for anyone on the line to raise their hand or suggest, how do we make this a reality? I feel this desperation of, yeah, we want to do it. How? Mark Fine writes that he's at Andrews Cooper. He has a team of engineers interested in helping accelerate design, manufacturing, and testing. And what though? I mean, give me a project.
Yeah. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do right now, so at part of the conversation I had with Medtronic, they are connecting me with their main sourcing person, who is supposed to give me some introductions to those chosen ones that they're going to support to try to help the PV560. So my understanding, and they told me exactly this, that Medtronic doesn't need any help. You know, they have the resources. These partners that they've chosen may need some help. So that's what I'm trying to do now, is get conversations going with the partners to see if maybe they can coordinate some of the smaller and medium-sized guys. Because I mean, you know, if you look at the smaller to medium-sized manufacturers, they're the lifeblood of our country, you know.
Myself there. I just sorted now by people. I started off with William. I never asked this question. Let me do that now. First, he states, the only way to do a new device is to an agency or government thing to take the lead, that we coordinate with the regulatory. His original question was, we're working on a vent project through McGill and Montreal Hospital. We'll see if we make the cut. He's looking for information on liability, patents, manufacturing, supply chain, and what is the market doing to purchase certified FDA. I don't understand that. Purchase certified FDA. Any alternative certifications? What should we do for new designs? A lot of questions there. So he's working on a vent project, and he's looking for information on basically everything that goes into making the thing and validating the thing. Where, you know, William, I'm gonna make you a speaker as well, because I don't know that I fairly represented your point. So let me just. I've opened your mic, William.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. Thanks.
So we're working with a group, Montreal General Hospital and McGill University. They posted a ventilator development challenge, and so along the with the second question I had was, I've been working on ventilator designs for a while, but the only way I've been able to find a way actually into the market or to actually get your product even noticed is to go through an agency like one of these challenges, or going through submission through DOD or CDC or one of those big agencies. So, you know, just trying to do it off as a private company, especially right now, everybody's trying to come up with something. You're spinning your wheels. So going through a private, or going through an agency, an organization that has connections with the government, or with somebody that has the ability to push your product out, to help you with the design and with the regulatory. That's the only way that I've been able to find any way into that. As far as the second part was, we're looking at going, the challenge was to come up with something that is open source, to be able to develop this in other countries. And so my concern was that we're, out of the great goodness of our heart, we're making this available. But is there anything on the regulatory side? Is there anything as far as liability? Is there, there's all kinds of questions, especially when you go international, that we're going to be looking at. I don't see us trying to get into the United States market. We probably would be able to get into the Canadian or EU, but that all depends on a lot of things. And you're right. I think we're behind the 8 ball in a lot of ways, but we're looking at, you know, what's going to happen in South America, China again, what's going to happen, you know, around the world. So what are the options that we have there? And
Sorry, I muted you in anticipation of you being done, because I can hear the echo when we speak.
Because there was a lot there, but just to narrow down on one thing that he said about the liability during this period of time for the products that are coming to market. That's something that also is a little scary to me, to reiterate some of Tom's comments. It's my understanding that when there's an emergency use in effect, that the products that come out during that time, that there's some sort of liability protection for it. I haven't done too much digging into that, but it's not normally like when a ventilator might fail. And we brought a ventilator to market hastily because of this, and it fails. It seems like that there's some sort of liability protection that's afforded, which is even scarier to me. We've cut corners and we've removed any liability.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I've been thinking about that liability as well, and I didn't know that there was some forgiveness there and so forth. I mean, I just think that after this, there's going to be a lot of busy lawyers.
Folks, I'm putting the link for our chat room for you again to consider joining, because it's clear to me now the screen is full of comments and questions. Both Tom and Michelle are on the chat room, as am I, as are frankly many of the folks on this call. So the way we can stay productive through the week until our next call is that way. Otherwise, I won't be able to marry everyone together. Jim Lehman, I'm going to give you the mic next because you've left a half dozen comments and maybe you can summarize them better than I can. So, Jim, I've opened your line.
Hey, can you hear me?
You can.
Great, thank you. I have a med device background and know a little bit about manufacturing systems, but I also have been working in combination products, which also includes the drug products, so lots of regulation. And so my main point was to share, as other people have shared, that I think the risk lies pretty highly in people that want to take advantage of this so-called situation and create a new vent for themselves to make money, as I understand it. I'd rather see, from my perspective, people taking advantage of the situation by manufacturing parts that are already made, that are already approved, that are already been tested out. In other words, their design is correct. Getting them to vendors that have the IP that also can then build, or not vendors, but maybe manufacturers that have the IP that would be able to build under their QA system and release it. But to do all that, to get that infrastructure ready, yes, you need at least 5 or 6 companies that want to lead that. And I don't know who they could be, but Medtronic, you said, already is doing their own thing, but maybe they could be a little bit more open. And sorry about the noise, but maybe be about a little bit more open toward this approach where they have a lot of supply chain people, right, to supply them and get production levels up to where they need to be. But I'll stop there and mute myself because I know it's the.
Yeah, and I think from my conversations with Medtronic, that's what they're doing. So, they made it very clear to me that, they were reached by, thousands of different companies, and they can't even, remotely handle all the requests and so forth. So they've chosen, I think the number is 3, like I advised before. They've chosen 3 vendors that they're going to support to hopefully, do something. And, the caveat, though, is that those 3 vendors that they chose cannot mess with their existing supply chain, because, again, Medtronic is also going to be building the PV560 themselves.
So, Tom, let me ask you this. What is the likelihood that ventilators are going to get freed up as certain dense population East-West Coast cities move past their curve? And because the virus is kind of moving into the less populated areas in the center of the country, but at that same time, like I think I saw in the news yesterday that the New York numbers are finally started trending down. So what is the likelihood that we're going to free up existing respirators and ship to other areas that need them faster than people can get these new respirators to market?
As a point of clarification, I think that their rate of increase has declined, but it is still on the upswing and they're already saturated. But your point well taken. Tom?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question, and not one that I would have a good answer for, because I just don't know. That is not my area of expertise, and sometimes I try not to look at the news because it's exaggerated in certain cases, but I don't think we know the answer
Patrice,
to that.
I went ahead and opened your line. You had a couple of comments. If you'd like to go ahead. Patrice Nedelec?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can.
Hi, everybody. Patrice here, quality regulatory guy. Tom, you started us with a very, very interesting discourse. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. In your view, I have a question. What is, as it stands, the most significant risk to what we need to do now? You seem to be concerned about newcomers or people who would start to do things, but I fail to understand your number one concern of sorts. Could you share, please?
Yeah, my number one concern is that we have a lot of people doing a lot of different things, and making a mask is one thing, but making a sophisticated medical device is another. And I think people in desperation are going to take products that should not be used on human beings, and it's going to hurt people.
Second.
So that's my take on it,
I'm going to give Mark Fine the microphone. So Mark, you should be heard now.
Hello, everyone from lovely Camino Island. I work at Andrews Cooper. We've got offices in Bothell, and Ventec is just down the road, and I've been told that their parking lot is full, so they're really full speed ahead making ventilators. Andrews Cooper also has a lot of offices down in the Portland area, but our specialty really is automation and testing. And we build devices and tools just to make manufacturing go faster, better, cheaper. We've put together a team to design a ventilator, and I've brought in some intensive care, critical care hospitalist physicians as consultants. The head of the bioengineering department at UW at University of Utah, who's designed ventilators for Draeger. As you know, Draeger invented the ventilator 100 years ago. So we've got biomedical engineers, we've got regulatory people helping us with the emergency use authorization procedures you go through the FDA. We've got epidemiologists basically looking closely at Dr. Christopher Murray's projections from UW, looking at when this is going to peak out. And the question we've had is everyone late to the party? If this peaks out within 30 days, will we still need ventilators? And our thoughts are, yeah, because it's better to have them when you don't need them than not have them when you do need them. There's likely to be a second wave, especially with some of the foolish political actions going on where people are saying, go ahead, go out, go to the beach, gather together. Plus, there are new viruses coming down the road. Lastly, from a clinical point of view, and that's where I'm coming from, there's a lot to understand about ventilators. Most people who are on ventilators for this kind of disease are going to be on them for 2 to 3 weeks. So you can have what I call a starter ventilator, which will keep, the people who aren't terribly ill okay for a while, and you can wean them to just nasal cannula oxygen. The folks who are on ventilators for a long time need a more sophisticated device. And then there's the issue of weaning people off ventilators, which is another big issue. It's a complex project, and I think it's really wonderful that a lot of people are working on it. My son's part of a makers group with people all over the world, brilliant young engineers making personal protection gear and masks. So it gives me hope that the younger generation is not waiting for the government or big corporations to step up. They're actually doing it. So we're very interested in working with groups who need help. We've got a lot of mechanical engineers who know how to ramp stuff up quickly, and we're here to help.
Is your question, how can you help, or how, where do you make yourself available? So Mark, too, is part of that Slack channel, And I would invite anyone on the call who feels that they can use his time and talent and the group over at Andrews Cooper to reach out to him. I am going to share my screen next because the next comment was long, and my friend asked me to relay it anonymously. So let me do that. And if you could confirm, you can see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'll read it, and let me see if I can make it still a little larger for everybody. I'll make this 250. Let's see. Okay, I'll read. My group is a medical device development group, and we've designed a simple working ventilator design with good safety controls intended to be produced by just about anyone, including risk analysis and simplified components other than some pressure centers which would need to be purchased. We were told by the White House, the White House's ventilator review lead, that it looked great, that there are thousands, literally thousands of ventilators that are already being made and stockpiled as we speak, all tested and certified as medical devices. At present, there is a mix of various ventilator makes, types, and models that are starting to flood out into the stockpiles. This involves different designs and consumables, sometimes dependence on foreign parts, which have enormously complicated the warehousing and logistics of resupply, so we have halted our ventilator design work. So this individual asked that I not identify him or her. What do you say to this?
I mean, I still stand by I still stand by the fact that I think we need to bind together and make parts for existing products. I would think that, halting the ventilator design right now is probably a smart move. That's an opinion.
Well, the FDA is going to take things and kind of, and this is again my opinion, they're going to first look at people who have devices that are legally cleared in the United States that are making modifications. That's going to be the first tier of things that can come to market quickly. The second tier will be people who have them legally marketed in other countries like Japan or the European Union, but they're fully functional devices that those companies wrap up and can import them. Maybe not without a 510K. They'd have to go with FDA, talk to the FDA about it. And then the third thing is going, and it's going to be the longest straw, is going to be bringing a brand new ventilator to market underneath this emergency use. And again, I think we're going to be well past, I agree with Tom, we're going to be likely well past the curve besides somebody, by the time somebody could design something, even by the seat of their pants, that would have some semblance of safety testing behind it.
Derek writes,
I mean,
go ahead. Go ahead, Tom.
So I think one thing that I'd like to point out, though, is that this is going to spur innovation, but I don't think that a Me Too ventilator, and don't take that the wrong way because I don't know your product, but if it's a device that's different than what's out there now and so forth, I would put time and effort into new innovations, new products, new ways of doing things, as opposed to duplicating what others already have. Again, that's an opinion, but that's the type of stuff that I would spend time on if I had the ideas in my own head.
And something to think about along those lines is, we're trying to be all open source and collaborative, but if you really do come up with something innovative and what Tom and I are speculating is correct, you're not going to be reasonably able to bring it to market. It's important that you still protect your IP going forward. And so you've helped, but you haven't protected it in a way that anybody's going to actually touch it to commercialize it outside of the pandemic.
You just took a little family moment there to remind folks at home that Daddy's on an international call and we should be quiet. So when people ask me, how are you guys doing? I say, we're asymptomatic and at one another's throats. That's a joke. We're not asymptomatic. No, I'm kidding. We are, and we're fine. But okay, a little humor there. Andre, I'm going to give you the mic. I'll read first what you wrote. Totally agree with Tom. Anyone new to ventilators should stop. They're wasting their time. The regulatory path is not possible. Care to add, or have I captured it?
Oh, you captured. Am I on there? Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, yeah, Tom, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I've had a number of companies that have called us about whether or not we could work with them to manufacture. And when I ask them any questions, they say they've never even done a ventilator before. And I just really tell them, gee, thanks for calling, but you're wasting your time. You know, that's what I said before, they're spinning their wheels. It's a mistake at this point. I know people have good intentions, and I applaud that, and I think it's great. But candidly, you know, both you and Michelle are 100% correct. The regulatory mountain and the liability are just too much right now for something that's brand new.
Okay, so let me ask, GM and Ford have never made ventilators. ...
Nor has Dyson.
So is that
I
a
don't know if
mistake?
Dyson really has anything. Have you heard anything really coming out of Dyson yet?
I thought
As far
I had. Well,
Yeah,
what
I
about,
thought that they had designed one and that they were prepared to be able to make, I think, 100,000 of them.
Yeah, and the last that I heard was that they're not going to be able to get it cleared. So you can make 100,000 and have them sitting there and no one's going to be able to use them.
what about Ford and GM? They've never made ventilators before. Is that some kind of, well, the president's oversight and therefore what? I don't even know how to finish the sentence.
Well, my assumption is that companies like that would have the muscle and the wherewithal to get what's needed to accomplish that. A small company just doesn't have the resources to get something like that going.
Well, and GM's workforce is very technically skilled in assembling electrical components that are important for safety and functionality of the products.
Absolutely.
Let me add, I've added Andrew Belden. Andrew, are you in the UK, I think?
Yes, I'm in the UK.
How do you pronounce your last name?
Fielden.
Fielden. You're saying that Dyson is getting tested to meet all requirements?
Yes. So there's a lot of waivers in the UK around the testing, and I attached in the link that the specification for a rapid ventilator design that has to meet certain requirements, but also has waivers to do certain parts, but it's only valid for the pandemic. If the company wants to use the device afterwards, then it needs to comply with all the regulations. So I work for a company that does the testing for biocompatibility. So testing around 18562 that covers for the ventilators using materials that cause no harm or minimal harm, as it were, because the risk at the minute is from irritants and sensitizers. So I agree with all the comments of it needs to be a design that works, but it needs to be a design that meets people's requirements. And
Andrew, I shared your link. I just shared your link broadly with everyone. I encourage you to join that chat room so people can ask you about it specifically. It seems to have come from NHS, I think.
The MHRA, so the equivalent of the FDA in the UK. So that is their design spec for a new rapid ventilator. So it will be interesting for people to review that, of seeing what are the minimal requirements. So to enable something to pass through part of the training, no battery power, or if it does the battery need to comply? So a lot of the points in there, I am not an engineer, so a lot of it doesn't make sense to me. I'm an analytical chemist by training, so the parts have been involved in inhalation products for the pharma industry for a number of years. So that's my background, used to testing that part of it. So I'd recommend to have a look, and that may give people some guidance and some scope of what is the minimal requirement.
Thank you for that. I hope to see you on the chat room. I'm going to give the mic to David Brana. You just wrote in a generous amount from about Ford and their ventilator. You want to go ahead and talk to us about that?
Hi there. I'm also in the UK. I've just been gathering bits of information and stories around this, and I suppose my comment, what I gather around Ford is this GE Healthcare collaboration. So again, they're making a product. I think it's not even a GE product, but it's a third-party smaller company, a simpler ventilator, which Ford are using their manufacturing capability to produce. So I've just gathered this from various sources on that. It's not insider knowledge, but that's what I picked up.
Okay, I'll share that in the comments. I want also to give, thank you, David. Derek White. Let me try this. Self-muted. Okay, you have self-muted yourself.
Hi,
Okay,
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. You had a couple comments?
Hi, I just want to make a couple of comments based on what's been said so far.
Where are you calling in
I
from?
totally agree that I'm calling in from a little stone cottage near the Welsh border where I'm encamped with my 2 teenage children and a lot of beer.
Okay.
I just wanted to comment that overall, I think, sorry, say again?
I was just commenting that I've picked 3 people in the UK in a row. Please continue.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I totally agree that it's unreasonable to expect a brand new company to be effective in the time we have with the regulatory approach. My own project is regarding a non-regulatory route, a sort of Uber, we're not a taxi company route, mostly for developing countries. The curve is quite different in other markets. So you've been talking predominantly about the curve in the US. The curve in Africa is quite delayed, and they're very vulnerable because of immune-compromised populations and very overcrowded cities, similar to Southern Asia. So they often don't have anything. So there may be a need for a non-regulatory route, very low, very basic,
Eric,
very low cost devices.
I saw the comment, and I wonder if the implication that you're saying is that given that it hasn't hit Africa yet, for example, as hard, that it would be premature for us to give up on designing new products? Is that your intended message?
No, I think that there are enough safe, well-regulated devices on the market, and I agree that for the regulatory compliance side of the market, there are enough designs, and we should really focus our resources on those few designs, or as few as possible, so that there can be some economies of scale, simplification, sharing, etc. I'm mostly looking at a non-compliant, under the radar approach, and there's hopefully going to be some form of waiver on emergency or compassionate grounds for devices like this. I also wanted to mention a comment that was made earlier regarding trying to have your cake and eat it on the open source front, because really you can't really do this. You either have to be open source, in which case you share openly and honestly. I don't really believe that the Medtronic offer was in good faith. I looked at the documents and they chose an old and very complex device to put out there. I think it would have made more sense and been much more useful to put a more modern, simpler device out there, which can be replicated more easily. You know, these devices now can take advantage of very low-cost processing power, low-cost sensors, and it doesn't make sense to have a device be open source, which is so complicated and so difficult and has so many obsolete parts. So I think on the open source, we really need to be open about this and say, okay, we're going to share everything we have. We're not going to try and hold back in case we can make some money out of this later. We don't want to think about our IP rights at the end of the pandemic. We've just got to give up on that and just go fully open source and try to have a couple of very simple designs. So
you for that.
those are my main comments so far.
Give me your take on that.
I mean, I agree in many cases. I mean, the PB 560 is, it's, I don't know what the intentions were for real, but, the fact that they have brought some people to actually spend time with to try to help them get up the 560, companies who have lots of resources like Foxconn, makes me think that, the intentions were good. And, in general, I like to think everybody's intentions are good. Although we know that some people are out there just for the money, and that's also scary. But, I agree. I mean, if there was a product that was an existing product that somebody open source that was a little bit more modern and a little less complicated, it would make it easier to help. And I think that, if you're going to go open source, you gotta do it. I mean, you're either in it to try to build something for yourself, or you're in it to help the situation, and people who are in it to help the situation, those are the ones that really have the best interest of where we're going in mind.
I was
Go ahead.
I was looking at the document Andrew provided. It's actually a very helpful and informative document, and I think if the FDA had published something similar, like here are minimum expectations, and that any device that can't at least meet this, just don't start, don't try. But that it's also very, very clear that these devices, like in that UK document, that these devices are not going to be able to stay on the market after the emergency use. So I think that the document that the UK published is actually very helpful, not only to designers on what they need to do, but on just don't start if you don't already understand and think you can reasonably get to this level of testing and requirements.
I want to give the
maybe a good benchmark for people to evaluate their current designs, where they're at, and see how close are we to meeting this minimum set that the UK has defined. Because I would think that that would reasonably be a recognizable minimum barrier to entry for several different markets.
I've opened the mic for my friend Khalid, who's a 10X alum, and I know a bit about his background. Khalid, tell us your experience with DoD and your point of view on this.
Well, so I started as a reservist right after 9/11. I'm not sure if you can hear me, by the way.
I can. You can talk a little louder, though.
Yep, absolutely. So I started as a reservist right after 9/11, and been in and out of active duty since about 2002. Been very interested in a lot of the engineering side and how the Navy actually does things, and actually had the pleasure and the honor of running a shipyard program that allows for surge folks to go into the shipyard and help with some of the manufacturing that we were doing there. So how do I get a ship out on time, or maybe quicker than on time, and that kind of thing. So I was kind of thinking of that model. Why is it that we don't have a surge capability within manufacturing to push out whatever part it is that we need today in an emergency situation? And when I was in Afghanistan, a lot of the rules that we would normally work under the federal acquisition regulations were dumped under contingency operations. So is there a similar thing here where we can get, I know how to make this part, so it's likely that I'll know how to make this part also. And I can gear up in a week to start making parts for ventilators that we're going to need in 3 weeks, so that we have the ventilators in New York ready to go. And that's really kind of where my idea was. Your biggest buyer is going to have to be DoD, I would think. DoD has got to buy. They've got lots of money. They've got lots of capacity, and they can move things around quicker than any other part of the government.
Khalid, that's a great idea, but what can we on this phone do about that? We can't influence how they behave, can we?
You know, I think the ideas have started popping up on the call. So I think I'm going to make a few phone calls and I'll try to follow up with everybody. I think there may be some things that we can do.
By the way, we're almost at an hour. Some people will have to drop off. There's still far more than I can address here. I'm grateful for everyone's participation, and frankly, this open the mic thing is kind of fun. More fun than me just reading questions, and we get to hear the color that I'm unable to leverage. So thank you, everyone, for that. Venkat has written a number of things. I'm going to try to. He said, "You know what, Venkat? There's too much here. I'm going to give you the mic as well." Let's see. Okay, Venkat.
Hello.
Hi. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling from Visakhapatnam, India.
Hi.
And I have experience, and I work in something related to 60601 series of standards. I have an idea that many people across the world are focused only on ventilators, whereas really, if you see, we also a lot of pulse oximeters or oxygen concentrators or simple medical gas solutions, and even portable ultrasounds, as well as mobile x-rays, because whenever you have this ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, a mobile x-ray can do a lot. And similarly, solutions to disinfect a CT scanner, like in China, they had used a CT scan for diagnosis also. So there are a lot of other solutions also, like PCR machine, for example, which is as complicated as a ventilator, but it will never endanger anybody's life. Suppose a low-cost PCR machine. So these things also, if like we can concentrate, I think it would be a very good idea. That's my view. And I have another point, which is that if someone wants to make a low-cost ventilator for the developing world or for a really emergency purpose, a sort of there is a design by MIT. It's an open source design, which is a kind of a modified ambu bag. And anything you are going to achieve right now at low cost is only would most likely be a version of a modified ambu bag. So any comments on that I wanted to hear. That's all. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. You know, I mean, we're very focused on ventilators, and there's other things that we can be looking at to help. So, you know, I don't, you know, it's good the information you just gave us. I've been kind of infatuated with ventilators, so I'd like to look at other things as well.
Corey Wilson asks or says, Joe, I think the best thing we can do regarding ventilators is to develop a national clearinghouse of supply and demand for existing ventilators that have been commercialized. To our earlier point, how do we get ventilators that are currently idle in city X that is past the peak to city Y that's in the midst of their peak? And while I don't know the answer clearly, I believe that was part of the president's press conference yesterday. That's what they are doing or facilitating. I don't know if
there are what's called stockpiles, you know, kind of at various places around the country of these types of medical devices. But I heard California got a shipment of like 100,000 ventilators out of a stockpile somewhere, and none of them worked because they had just been sitting there not used for so long. So they had to do a bunch of troubleshooting right out the gate on the stockpile.
Okay. Ken might stockpiling ventilators. Joe, you should communicate this to AdvaMed since they are close to the manufacturing of ventilators and what is required. So if I've now sorted by time written so I can see comments as they come in at the bottom. If anyone has a particularly strong relationship with AdvaMed, Ken, you're among them, and wants to loop them into this conversation, this is recorded. I will make it available to everyone who was on the call. I would like to ask now, as we almost close, and I apologize to those who have commented, and I've not had a chance to give you the mic or read. Here's my question to you all. What do you believe is the most productive thing we, on this call, from around the world, all well-intentioned, all with different skills, engineers, regulatory, quality, strategy, project management, what practical? I don't want our calls to be field do, but I don't want us to be like, well, and I felt good that I listened and participated, but really not going to do. Is there something that I can just, if everyone kind of got to me and a clearinghouse of go talk to Michelle, go talk to Tom, let's work on this, let's work on that. I'm asking you all now, if you would, to comment and think that you could contribute or what we as a group could do so that we really make a difference in life. That's my my comment. First, Connie says use of the group is to share our contacts. I agree, and I'm happy to do that as best I can. And for the third time, I'm going to give you guys the link to this chat room because I am making the list of to join available to everyone else who chooses to join so that you can see all like-minded people ready and willing to give of themselves. And I'm sorting, I make it filterable so you can sort by their expertise. I'm capturing LinkedIn profiles to really facilitate this cross-pollination of ideas. Derek writes, can the experts decide the best simple existing approved ventilator and pressure the release collaboration on that design? I will speak to that and say I think that Khalid's probably in the best position talking to his friends at DoD insofar as we're able to do that. Jim asks, can we start a consortium in the different areas of need? He'd like to be in on the coordination of manufacturers making parts from open source components. So Jim, the best way I can support that, again, is that chat room. We have a chat here. Let me just show you what I have. I'll share my screen. And here, so here's a list of everyone who's on it. And right now, these are the channels that we're supporting. One for diagnostics, how to use this tool, introduce yourself, fund, marketing, PPE, regulatory, ventilators, things that we're discussing on this call, an invitation for people to tell us what they need. Here is the helpful engineering one, and it's way too overwhelming that I didn't even know what channels to join. But to give you a sense, I'm just going to scroll. Deployable field hospitals, biochem, medical consulting, software, QA, disinfection, guidelines, hardware, PPE, immediate needs. So I think the way they've set it up is basically anyone who joins can create their own channel for their own project, and some kind of senior management looks through these and helps to direct some of them. I'm not part of their senior team. I don't know how they're doing this, but as you can see, just as they have, we could theoretically start a channel for any conceivable idea. I just don't know how to support that, because in my experience with the premium channel that I lead for, and I'll show you this one. So these are the folks in premium, and I have some channels that everyone is in, including baby pictures, but I've been disappointed by how few baby pictures have come in. And then I have these other ones for careers, cybersecurity, design development, digital health, etc. And I find that the proliferation of channels means that the most popular ones get a lot of attention and the other ones just kind of languish. So I'm not sure what the right number is. I'm happy to take advice on that. Patrice, the best we can do is to support people already involved in production of necessary equipment, help them with risk management in particular, and with specific knowledge they may be short on, software regulatory impact, for example. Connie asked me to share this link, which I'm now doing with everyone. And I guess I'll conclude with thank you, and for the 5th or so time, an invitation to join that chat room, because it's the most practical way that I can connect people. Otherwise, I just can't get my work done and support my family, which if I get run out of the house, then really I'm not a help one. There we are. Thoughts, Michelle and Tom?
Well, thank you everybody for joining, and I think one last comment is, for any of this to work, I think we need an integrator, somebody who really, knows how to put the end pieces together. I support local manufacturers qualified local manufacturers being able to build individual pieces, but we need an integrator, and that's going to be really important. And then, the question becomes, that integrator, how do they choose their vendors? Everybody wants to help. So it's a complex problem, even though conceptually it makes sense. And, a lot of the concepts and so forth are easy to understand. Its execution is not as easy.
Tom, I expect that your inbox in the chat room will be somewhat active today, so please keep that open. Michelle, anything to add as we close?
No, just a reminder that it's not a regulatory free-for-all, particularly for ventilators. So, just make sure that your development efforts are focused and that you're communicating with the FDA early and often about what your plan and product is.
I'm going to mute you and your entire organization there. I'm leaving concluding that, and I'll just take a thumbs up if you agree, and there's my son doing the dishes finally, but he should have done them last night. I don't know if you can hear them all crashing in the sink. I'm hearing that the idea of developing a new ventilator system at this point is futile, and don't do it. That's what I'm taking away, not the head of MDG, Joe Hage, is taking that away. Is that what you are also taking away, Tom and Michelle?
Yes, I agree with that statement.
And Michelle does too, with a thumb? Yes, okay. Well, if you have and enthusiastically agrees, if you have a contrary point of view, I definitely want to hear it. And I will thank everyone now for tuning in. Next week, I fixed it. This is the last time you'll have to sign up for individual weeks. I will post for you, actually, if you give me a second, I'll do it now, the link to sign up for not only next week, but the next 7 weeks. They'll take you through the end of May, and then if you decide you want to do some more at that time, you can. And that way I can cut down on how many times people have to register. So I apologize that it took me that long to figure it out. I just put that in the chat box. You're welcome to click on that now and register for next week, and calls through May 28th. And next week, we're going to talk about the emergency use authorization in greater detail. Michelle, you were talking about it. For ventilators, it's not going to be as easy, perhaps, as PPE. And Shannon and her group at UserWise are going to lead that conversation. So for this week, I'm Joe Hage. Wash your hands and don't touch your face. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.